Is everyone entering? So go ahead and start, Kathleen.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kathleen Salinas, and I'm the Program Manager of the Brentwood Arts Center. I thank you and welcome you to our virtual auditorium for BAC's Conversations on Art series with our host, Meg Linton, and guest artist, Kim Cridler. Our Executive Director, Amy Gantman, regrets that she can't be here today as she is out of town. It has been a challenging time for the world and for the BAC as we transitioned our offerings to a virtual format, which allowed BAC to continue to fulfill its mission of providing high-quality arts educational opportunities to students of all ages. Our success is due to our incredible and generous board of directors, leadership council, donors, staff, faculty, and students who have supported the BAC through thick and thin. The pandemic has also allowed us to experiment with new technology and create programs like Conversations on Art. And I thank our anonymous donor who has made this series possible for the next 12 months. We can only do all that we do because of our generous donors who believe everyone should have access to the arts and education. We'd like to be sure to mention that we have secured a long-term lease in Santa Monica, located at 1625 West Olympic Boulevard. The campus is in close proximity to 18th Street, Crossroads School, and a metro stop is nearby. We take possession of the building on November 1st and will immediately commence a build out. We expect to offer classes in the spring 2023 term, so your contributions are more important than ever. Our host, Meg Linton, and BAC Executive Director Amy Gantman met at Otis College of Art and Design while Meg was the Director of Exhibitions for the Ben Maltz Gallery and Amy was the Dean of Continuing Education. The divisions collaborated on many public programs, and we are thrilled to bring Meg's love and respect for our artists to the BAC. Meg has been visiting artist studios for over 20 years in her various roles as a director and curator of contemporary art spaces in the Central and Southern California region. Currently, Meg is lead producer on a documentary film about performance art in Los Angeles in the 1970s and 80s called Acting Like Women, directed by Sherry Galkey. She is also working on an exhibition about the life and work of artist Keith Julius Buccinelli, writing a novel, and of course, conversing with Kim for the BAC this afternoon. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's great to be here. Hello and welcome to Conversations on Art and our virtual studio visit with Kim Cridler. Fall is finally here. Halloween is just around the corner, followed by Dia de los Muertos, where we honor our loved ones who are no longer with us. And on November 6th, the time changes. Nothing stays still at this time of year. So thank you for sharing taking the time and sharing your Friday with us. Before I introduce our guest, a big thank you to the Brentwood Arts Center and our anonymous donor for making this program possible, and to the behind the scenes team who make this program run smoothly. We are recording today's presentation, and we ask that you please mute your microphones and turn off your video. During the conversation, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box, and I will either work them into this discussion or ask them at the end. In the chat box, you'll also see that I have some additional information and links about Kim Cridler's biography and projects for you to peruse on your own. There's also instructions on how to save the chat, so you can look at that information later. I feel like I've always known Kim Cridler. In the late 1990s, we did a Matrix solo exhibition project at the University Art Museum at Cal State Long Beach. And together, we learned a lot from that experience as a young curator and artist. Kim is trained as a metalsmith, a materialist in the best sense, and an ambitious sculptor who imbues raw matter with beauty, contradiction, and profound meaning. She has degrees from impressive places and has taught in art programs across the country. She's installed stunning public art projects for several municipalities in the States and private commissions here and abroad. Earlier this year, the Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, featured Kim as part of their Master Metalsmith series. It's quite a distinguished honor. The solo exhibition was called Held, and there is an accompanying catalog, which I encourage you to go online and order from the museum. It's absolutely beautiful. And in the catalog, there's a nice long essay about Kim's work, and there's one quote I'd like to share. The curator, Akiko Bush, writes, Cridler is engaged with that struggle between the structural and the haptic, between established knowledge and the experiential, which is emotional, suspect, slippery, but what makes life worth living. Kim, we're so thrilled to have you joining us from your studio in Michigan. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so good to talk to you and have this little opportunity to show you my spot. I really do feel like we've grown up together, and you've just been such a special part of my life, somebody that's dedicated to the arts. But here we are in Western Michigan on an absolutely beautiful fall day, and I'm gonna take you to my shop, which
Yay.
is this little sort of pole barn structure. It's awesome for me. It's like my favorite place to be, other than walking in the woods. And once we get in, you'll see that it's kind of your regular handy ladies' place. We got chopped saws and a MIG welder. And there's this really basic 4-foot steel table that friends in Los Angeles helped me build, I don't know, 25, 26 years ago, 28 years ago. And I build all my work on this steel table. And so there's some current pieces that I'm working on here, and a recently finished piece for an upcoming exhibition I will have in Phoenix with Lisa Seti Gallery. There's another finished piece.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little soldering station. I was trained as a metalsmith, and so acetylene hard silver soldering is still a regular part of my practice for smaller details.
Pardon us, we're not seeing Kim's studio. We're still seeing the slide.
Oh, no.
I'm
Okay.
gonna back up.
Do we need to share? Maybe Kim needs to share and I'll stop sharing.
Let's see.
There we go.
Oh, is it showing?
It is now.
Are we there? Yay. Oh, you didn't get to see the beautiful fall day. I'm sorry.
You want to show it back again? There we go.
Yay. Autumn in
Challenges.
Western Michigan. So yeah, there's my table. A couple of friends helped me build this. I trained as a metalsmith, but moved to Los Angeles with jeweler's saw and hand tools. And a dear friend of mine, Ed Benavente, heard me using a jeweler's saw to cut steel stock. And he just leaned his head over the wall and he said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. Help me." And he's been a lifelong friend. So here we are in my shop. Little space over here for smaller work, handwork. I love materials. I'm always investigating materials, things that I bring in, things that I aim to emulate. Lots of hand tools. I love working by hand. Lots of beautiful references from the world, artists and nature.
Where's your stack of little boxes of things that you have under the table there?
I have a secret stash. I thought it was like, I was like being silly. I have this secret stash. I can't really see it, of material samples, and they're all labeled. I did spend some time teaching, and so I have boxes on researching rings and making chain and laminating gold and silver and casting bronze and carving coral, and it's like my little library.
Yeah. Where's the plasma cutter? I remember the day that Kim got the plasma cutter. It was like Santa came and delivered her some amazing thing. It was a remarkable day.
I have this great MIG welder and my little plasma cutter. I'm very much a hand builder, but the switch from working with hard soldering silver to being able to weld steel was really a fantastic switch for me to be able to fabricate larger objects. Because I had been trained as a metalsmith, I was always involved in vessels and those kinds of forms, but then to move from fabricating them with heat to electronic welding was a real game changer for me. Yeah.
Very cool.
So welcome to my studio. Thanks for coming.
Yay. So I'm going to share screen and we're going to dive right into the PowerPoint. If you guys will just give me a second. And let's see. Here we go. And let me pull up. I have just a little, there's something going on with my cursor. So let me try to pull up my chat box. Just one sec, everybody. I lose full access to my cursor when I pull up the PowerPoint. So everybody's going to have to help me with the questions as they come in today. Okay. There we go.
Okay.
Yay. So let me start. So we wanted to start with location. Where are you?
I am here in Western Michigan, and I grew up actually just about 6 miles from where I live today. And that little white dot on the map you see, that's Rockford, Michigan. I'm a 10-minute walk from the Rum Creek that leads to the Rogue River that drains into the Grand River for Grand Rapids, that then goes to Lake Michigan. So this is my little bioregion. And I grew up here, but moved to a lot of different places in the country. But and it was kind of a strange sensation coming back. I'd been living in Wisconsin, but when we found this place, it was home right away. My husband bought this house without me having seen it, because I was teaching back in Wisconsin and he was taking a new job. But it's on this marvelous, like 300-acre park. So I loved it right away. This is my family. And they make this place home too. Home really has been this sort of touchstone for me from this place. I grew up in my great aunt Margaret DeGroot's home. She bought this farm in the 1930s for back taxes. And her dad, who was an architect from the Netherlands, changed the house, renovated it, moved it to a lakeside position. And there he is, Bert DeGroot, with my mother, Diane, as a child. And so this place still exists. It's about, like I said, 6 miles from where I live. And I went back last Christmas. The house still stands. It's now being farmed as an apple orchard. But walking around with my husband, it's funny how these things are so deeply embedded in you that you don't see them. But when I saw this next image of my great-grandfather Bert's landscaping with this ceramic or this cement urn, of course, it all kind of makes sense. This attention to the aesthetics of a lived place, this investment of handworking to enrich a place. And so this is work that comes very naturally from this love of home. This vessel where it's breaking apart with butterflies, or this next piece that we see that is paired with these lilies that are slowly opening to reveal themselves over a steel structure.
What are the lilies made out of?
Those are actually hydrocal, or like a gypsum cement with a steel structure within, and then they're dipped in wax. Or this urn that's stopped with this large spherical form covered with cast bronze bees. Or this tiny piece made of these delicate panels of beeswax framed with brass wire.
Can you smell the beeswax?
Oh yeah, it's such an incredible material. I started working with it when I was a graduate student, just for its, of course it's very enduring. It preserves. If you think about the encaustic paintings in Pompeii, or how you might use paraffin wax in your own kitchen to preserve jams and jellies. But then it's this fantastic natural product that is so rich with smell and tactility. Or this piece that is lined with these ceramic swallows. So this vessel quality had been fundamental to my work really since I finished graduate school, which was in '93 from the State University of New York at New Paltz. I had studied metalsmithing there, but I made a break from creating functional vessels to engage in a piece like this that's lined with blown eggs. Again, like something that we did as kids to preserve the eggshells and turn them into ornaments. So there's always been a real focus in my work on domestic ornamentation and considering the other stories that materials can bring to a piece.
So this is just part of your references.
Really central to our. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we lost you for a second. So go ahead, explain, because this is one of your references that you use in your lectures. Yeah, there's such a fundamental part of being human is to contain and collect. And
many people argue that we are human because we contain things in vessels, and whether it's the bodies of our dead, grain, wine, it is sort of central for us to use the vessel to separate what is precious from what is ordinary. So this piece is made out of woven hair. And of course, there's all those wonderful references to hair and the depth of meaning and material and identity that comes from hair.
Is this the horsehair?
It is.
Yeah.
I have not worked with human hair, although that's very much a part of the jewelry practice and history from Victorian times, to use the hair of a beloved deceased member of your family to hold close to you. And actually, I think I have an image coming up of a little sample of that. This was another horsehair piece, laurel leaf vase, or this next one. Oh, this crow piece with this long ribbon of woven braided horsehair, still life.
And you pick materials that have these incredible rich histories. Like horsehair was used so much for fabric and, upholstery.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this incredible material.
Yeah, very durable.
And it disappeared.
I know. I remember woven horsehair upholstery. Fantastic. And we had a bridle in our home that was all woven out of horsehair. I think I've always just been very keen and very sensitive to the material that's already within materials that we use, and how they speak so much about the human invention of using these really rich materials from the natural world. So this is that bit. It's a little brooch with this inscription, and it is woven hair from someone that was loved.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that the hair contains the DNA, and now we could grow this person. Right.
Good or bad, but yeah, you're right.
I know we don't know about the person, but we don't know if we want them back. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that even back then, the essential thing that, also keeps growing when the body is no longer vibrant.
Wow.
Yeah.
It really does
become this thing later generations. That was the one thing they saved that has, that contains everything. It's the essence.
Yeah. It does point to the mystery of how we all exist. I mean, I can't help but look around outside through the cycles of seasons changing and just marvel at this passage, this linked passage of life and death, and how we all sort of belong together on this planet. It's extraordinary. So this was graduate school work. I really started at SUNY New Paltz making hollowware, like raising sheets of metal into vessels. But after a while, it was hard. I didn't love it. And then I was like, what was really important to me were the stories that were embedded in those pieces. So I made this switch to discard functional utility in favor of these other emotional, social, familial stories. And I was also influenced by my love of decoration from growing up to a beautiful sample like this. This was a steel hauling truck in Madison, Wisconsin, that I was so taken that they would ornament this utilitarian vehicle.
Did you find out who made it? Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I called them. I found out who made it, and I called them. It was the Andre Manufacturing Company, and they were like the sweetest people. They're like, they have a headquarters that's sort of like Swiss Miss looking. It's like this Alpine theme. And they invited me to come have fudge at their office. Wow. How can you resist that kind of Wisconsin hospitality?
We know how important chocolate is in your life.
It's true. It's true.
When I first met Kim, she was working at, wasn't it LA Packing and Crating?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the office is just down from the See's Candy Factory. And so she probably still can name every single piece of See's Candy.
I love that company so much. But in addition to chocolate and ornament, there's so many samples for living moments of pattern and structure all throughout the natural world.
I
like
love
this
sample.
Yeah, it's a tangential image of magnified pine wood So it's structure on one hand, but as you get closer and closer, it breaks down into what almost looks like a chain. These links one into another. And of course, it reminds me of how meaningful chain was as a jewelry object, very laborious, hard to make. But this idea of these links belonging together and becoming more than what they are individually. This was a public work I did for a Wisconsin garden and museum. I have had the good luck of doing some outdoor pieces. This was bronze and slip cast vitreous china for the Payne Art Center.
It must look beautiful when it snows.
Yeah, I haven't been there in the winter. I would love to see it. It's a beautiful place. It was a lumber baron's sort of house. And so it has exquisite workmanship inside and out, but now it hosts the community as a place to celebrate. So I have some pictures making this of a very simple fabrication structure. There's my 4-foot steel table, just hand forming these bronze rods into a symmetrical arrangement, welding them together. And the next one shows, I think, images of the lily-like forms that I was actually able to create at Kohler Company through their artisan residency program, where you can work with industrial materials like cast bronze, cast iron, and slip cast vitreous china.
Yeah, and that program is really interesting too, because it pairs you with really amazing technicians, right?
Yeah, they do offer technicians that help coordinate the whole program. So you can come into the factory knowing very little bit about the processes, which are rather complex, and you get help from experts, not just the arts industry coordinators, but a lot of the factory employees too are really invested in the program.
Yeah.
Another public work I did with my husband, William Benny, it was this large wreath-like ring for the Phoenix Convention Center, kind of doing this large agave floral pattern.
How is that working? How did that work for you in terms of having like a whole crew to manage and engage with? And
it's really exciting. I mean, the great thing about working on a public art project is that you have to rely on the expertise of engineers and technicians and architects, and it's a really fun coming together. So every time I've engaged in a public art project, I've gotten probably much more out of it than I gave, because it's just a really fun experience learning from people and having them explore, adding in the sort of attention to detail of smaller, more kind of rich little elements into the sort of, massive mass-produced building.
mm-hmm.
It's this fabulous theoretician craft guy, David Pye, and he talks about the workmanship of risk is the work that you do by your hand, whereas the workmanship of certainty is what we find in automobiles and architecture and everything that's mass-produced. So public art is really a reminder that we can reinsert that variability of the hand back into what's been produced on a large scale for that richness, that sense of touch, of hand, of personal experience.
Yeah, and also it just brings a little wonder into the environment.
Yeah.
Where people can stop for a moment and breathe.
This was a public art project I did with the MTA. This is such a great organization and Metropolitan Transportation Authority's Art and Design program in New York City. Fabulous, fabulous public art program. I competed many times to try to get to a spot where I could, present work for a project. And I got through this time with the Mamaroneck station. It was a part of the North Metro line to add an element to their station in Mamaroneck, New York, which is just north of New York City in Westchester County.
So in the drawing that we're looking at, is that actually a river going through it, or is that part of the design as well?
That was part of the design, was because the town is half land, half water. I really wanted to marry some with the man-made. And so within the concrete plaza was a embedded stream in concrete. We ended up not using the color, but we did create stainless steel outline of a stream that kind of runs through the plaza.
And did you have to like present this to the community, and did you have community feedback and go through that whole process?
It was a multi-step process of applying for the opportunity through your proposal. And there were community members as well as, North Metro and people who are buying into the program on the panel that selected the artists. But once I got through, then it was mostly negotiating with the Arts-in-Transit program and the fabricators, because of course this was like way out of my league. So I found a fabulous fabricator, actually near SUNY New Paltz, where I was a graduate student, upstate New York, Chris Powers of Casey Fabrication, and working with them was great. So here I am like drawing this large, what ended up being a water jet cut aluminum canopy. I had to draw it so that I could draw it in Adobe Illustrator on my computer, because I'm just so hands-on. The idea of making something alive in my computer without that initial step I couldn't do it. I'm too old. I just love working with my hands. So that's where I started. But eventually, you can see how it ended up being fabricated in their shop with this. It was intended to marry the triumphal arch with a grove of trees. So that's actually Chris, one of the co-owners of the company, and Sal, who did most of the welding fabrication on the piece.
So were the metal sheeting that's at the top, it's multiple layers.
Multiple layers of powder-coated aluminum.
And then were those laser cut, like on a large laser from your design? Oh, water cut. Okay. Yeah. And then did you go back in and hand work those at all? Or were they just?
Yeah, I had multiple visits. I mean, there's some things that you cannot work through on a phone call or even with a Zoom. So that was kind of a fun year for me, because I got to go to Manhattan every month and visit the fabrication shop and talk with people, lots of meetings. But then I would go to the Met, and buy chocolate. So it was fun. Year. Good year.
So when you say the river, we can kind of see it in the cement.
You can barely see it. It's it's an embedded line articulating a curving stream. The line is actually made out of stainless steel. There's water jet cut to that form.
Nice.
It was just to try to lead you through the space.
And how was this response? Have you gone back to see it?
I get pictures from people, which is pretty sweet. I haven't been in a couple of years. This was, it was installed in 2014, but once in a while I'll get kind of random emails from people that are showing the work. And the town had this lovely kind of name where the Sweetwaters fall into the sea. So there you can see some of the layers of the foliage. And these bluebirds, kind of marsh birds.
And while we were preparing for this talk, we got into a discussion about materials, because here's a monument that will hopefully last a very long time, but it's also made out of materials that will eventually patina, change color,
age,
all of age, and all of those things. And do you consider that when you're selecting your materials for kind of these outdoor projects as part of evolution? Because it is part of the story.
You really have to consider the materials and people's expectations of what they expect. I mean, I love the patina of use. If you get a silver baby cup and your child uses it and drops it on the floor and you wash it in the dishwasher, after 20 years, it's going to look like part of somebody's life. And I find that's to be irreplaceable. But a lot of times in the public spaces, we want these sort of, we don't want to see the imprint of time. Although, to see marble steps in a train station worn by people's feet, to me is like the most beautiful part of it. Like this idea of this passage of humanity over material. But yeah, people don't want things to stay.
Yeah.
We're all terrified of death and just the destruction that comes with time. So it's something I struggle with in all of my work. I love natural materials. I would build everything that would I would build everything out of natural materials that would rust and fall apart if it was just up to me. After a while, we don't have to be here, right? We can go away, we can disintegrate. And I think probably our art can too. It'd be okay. So this was just,
yeah,
oh,
this
please,
was a show you were a part of called The Business of Beauty.
Oh, so, no, it wasn't. It was just William Morris.
Okay. This was the show you went to see.
Yeah, I was just so taken with that title of this. It was at the Art Institute this spring, and we saw it. And I mean, always loved William Morris's work, but just to make a statement that maybe beauty is a necessary part of our life, and that even this notion of fairness can mean both fair as being beautiful to look at, but also fair as in relation to one another, being a level playing field. And so I just threw this in here because I was thinking a lot about beauty, if you want to keep going.
Yeah.
And I had, this was an opportunity just to make something really lovely for a hotel in China, in Macau, China. They wanted, in their Darwin wing, they wanted some vessels outside of these waiting areas. And so I created a couple fabricated larger vessel pieces with floral elements and butterflies. And this was one of the finished works with these large Queen Anne lace-like flowers made out of freshwater pearls. And it was just lovely to just make something beautiful. Like, I feel like that is a legitimate function. Pleasure and beauty is a legitimate part of our experience. And
how tall are these?
About 36 inches. So they're larger than they look. That's a kind of funny thing about my work. It all looks like it's 12 inches tall. But these were actually really large. If you want to go to the next slide, you'll see I actually ran out of time building this work. And these Queen Anne's lace flower heads had about 160 pearls each. It doesn't look like that much, but I was really running out of time to finish it. So I invited a bunch of my friends and neighbors to come in and help me one winter weekend. And we all threaded pearls onto stainless steel wires so that I could rush to get these to the shipper, where they then sat for months because COVID had just broke out through China.
Wow. But they're installed, so they're installed in China now?
Yeah, the next slide shows an installation view.
Wow.
I was just really excited to be in the Darwin wing. I was like, wow, this is like as close to fame as I'm ever going to get.
And so we wanted to bring in the forest because the next body of work is really.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much more than beauty in the natural world. And there are these heaving forces that always point towards change. So this was just a windy day in my neighborhood. Or the next slide is an artist that I really love, Walton Ford, responding to a sort of a mythic tale about a group of passenger pigeons that was so heavy, it like felled a limb off a really large tree. And I keep chickens. They keep me on my toes. I love them. They'll have names, but they also attract a lot of hawks. So this was a red-tailed hawk that killed some of my baby chickens and then got caught in some netting around an apple tree. And he's actually sitting on his butt right now. I had to sneak up and free him. He was so mad. But it's just part of this reminder that we are in this big circle. And chickens are so humbling. If you show the next slide, they'll be having a great day and then they'll meet a hawk. Yeah, this was Julia and the hawk won this snowy day. I'd never had a hawk attack. This was January in the winter before. And I was dumb enough. It actually got 2 of my hens just because I'm not used to them hunting. But yeah, you can keep going. So some of the work reflects this change. This was called Suckering Willow, and it was referencing the way that if you cut willow trees, they sucker or they grow back right away. But within this one is a tiny little dead bird. It almost looks like it's at home in its spot.
So is that just painted or have you?
Yeah, it's soldered steel wire that I painted.
Nice.
So, wire, you can tell I love working with huge spools of 100-pound spools of wire in my shop. This is another one. This whole tree branch is made out of welded wire. to create this limb of bur oak that has overturned this vessel. And it's just about change. Like, we think we have our lives arranged and we have our appointment books, but life keeps happening. It will not leave you alone.
Is this part of the metal museum?
No, well, it was actually, it was there. This was at an earlier exhibition that was here in Grand Rapids.
Nice.
And this is another historical reference. Like I said, I love going to the Met or historical museums. This was actually at the Art Institute of Chicago, this brooch that shows this felled tree. And then this, in Greek, it reads, "It always flourishes," talking about the life force that continues and influenced this next piece, where a felled tree seems to be growing into a vessel. This relationship between trees and vessels got really exciting to me after I moved to Michigan. I always thought about the vessel as this container, this way of separating the precious. But then I started realizing that trees kind of do the same thing. They hold information, they hold history, they hold time. They're living and dead at the same time. You can keep going.
Yeah.
And so it kind of brings me to this piece, Witness Tree.
Do you want to talk about what a witness tree is?
Yeah, show me the next slide. It's a tree that is identifying like a certain point on property. They were used by surveyors for quite a long time. If you think about early surveyors, it was like a landmark tree. But you'll also see them. This next slide shows a tree that was in a public park where they're kind of, this other idea of a witness tree is something that has been there through time. So they're pointing out different moments of time within the rings, this sort of etched lineage of time and history on the trunk. And that piece that I made, Witness Tree, it's in the big picture. When you think about human beings as a species, sometimes I think we're going to outwear our welcome here. And we might be just another footnote in this larger life of our planet. So that piece sort of has a human skull embedded in it within the rings of that tree.
Yeah, I remember the first time I kind of got the concept of witness tree was when I was back east and on the edge of a Civil War battlefield.
Oh,
and
exactly.
You know, the bullet holes that were in the trees, you know, they were there for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of extraordinary to think about that. Like, we have a very specific idea of our lifespan as the measure of all things. Yep. But there, if you think about the lifespan of a tree or the half-life of plutonium or moss, you know, it's radically different concept of time.
Yeah. You know, we've got a few questions coming in, but I can't access my chat right now. All I can see is that there are 3 messages. So I didn't know.
Sherry asks the question, how do you keep the wire rigid so the perfect circle does not bend in?
Yeah, so steel wire is amazing material. I buy mild steel wire. If you go to McMaster-Carr, it's this huge industrial supplier. They sell these 100-pound spools of wire, but they'll also sell you, you know, a half a pound. And they have this material called Bend and Stay Soft wire. Bend and Stay Soft wire is a low carbon steel wire. It welds beautifully. It's very clean. There's no coating or anything on it that you have to worry about. And you can literally bend it. And I use pliers, but I also just use tension points on my steel table just to use leverage to bend. And then it just stays put. So it really is what it says. Hard, like otherwise you could also call it a hot rolled steel. It means it's soft. Whereas cold rolled steel has been finished. It has a finer surface on it, but it's under tension. And like if you heated it up, it would anneal in a spot and become soft. But the Bend and Stay Soft, the low carbon hot rolled steel is the way to go.
Is there another question, Kathleen?
Nope, the other was Jordan putting the information in the chat for our visitors. Cool.
So Kim, what's the other material that's with the metal here?
Yeah, so I made this part of human skull. You can see an eye socket, and I covered it in a mother of pearl and carved the pearl down. So it was like this fossilized human skull that was embedded within the rings of the tree, right at that's what they call the hinge when you're felling a tree. You know, you saw the notches into it, and then when it breaks over, it has this sort of parting spot at the hinge. And it was such a fun project. I drew this imaginary tree trunk, and then I had it water jet cut at a local fabricator. It was about 5 feet wide. And then I fabricated the surrounding sort of root flare.
So when you're coming up with these ideas, are you sketching constantly? Do you have sketchbooks? And
I make like large drawings, and I do keep sketches, and I fret a lot. I worry a lot that this is complete insanity. It's ridiculous. And then I get over myself and make it, because what else are you supposed to do but just try? And I learned so much more from making things than I learned from not making things, because I'm scared. So I try to go with just walking into it. These were quick studies. This is a little different for me, but I was imagining that these vessels are growing around trees rather than trees always accommodating us and our activities.
Nice. Talk about your fear a little bit. So
God, it's every day.
No, but like approaching this kind of piece. I mean,
Yeah, I was so scared.
What were the fear factors? Just like that it wouldn't turn out, or that?
Yes. Okay, so I'm scared all the time. I'm scared when I drive someplace new. I'm scared talking to people I don't know. I am scared of doing what I love most, which is making art, because I think it'll never be able to adequately express how much I love this world. And that is why I make art. I'm trying to love this world more. And part of it is that I've been working on vessels for so long. I think I'm a coward to keep making vessels. And then on the other side, I'm like, but wait, Walt Whitman worked for 50 years on Leaves of Grass. It's okay to be consistent. It's okay to keep digging deeper into what you love. So there's that like constant argument about if I'm a coward or if I'm a brave heart for even making the work. And then every time I try to make something different, I think it's just ridiculous. Oh, and then my husband will come by and say, can you find a slower way to make that? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. Yeah. But I'm completely consumed by the challenge of trying to make work. It is the best of me. And I feel so lucky to have found something that will challenge me until I die. But, like everyone that goes to art school, you want to think what you're doing is important. But I feel like there's some wonderful advice from Peter Sheldall, who's like, if you're lucky enough to do something you love, then just shut up and get on with it. Like no whining. So no whining.
Yeah.
Peter. This was a recent piece that I did specifically for the Metal Museum. And I want to give a shout out to the Metal Museum, because they're having their annual celebration repair days this weekend, where the community members bring in work to be repaired by skilled artisans. It's awesome. I should be there and I'm not, but I made this piece for that show at the museum, and it was a pattern that I created out of oak leaves and this kind of a pithos shape, which is a large storage jar. So you can see my 4-foot square table hard at work there.
And you crawling inside the sculpture.
Yeah, trying to find a better vantage point always. And I had created this little flock of finch-like birds out of sheet steel that was cut into a pattern. I had it laser cut this time. It was very thin, mild steel, and then formed, because I wanted to create this flock of birds that was just flying through the vessel. Like the vessel really is, for me, a symbol of human experience and the culture we've built. But then nature, maybe someday we'll just pass right through that.
And is this vessel taller than you, or about your same height?
Yeah, I'm shrinking. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it's human size.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Okay.
Colette asks, how do you reconcile loving this world, which includes people who mindlessly continue to destroy it? Does this impact your work?
Every day. This is what I think about more and more. Like, I felt like when I started studying art, it was so innocent, but now all I can think about as a human being is how our species is environment. Just recently reading about a 69% decrease in wildlife since 1970, just this week in the New York Times. And that's why I go back to, I mean, I have people I lean on. There's a marvelous writer, and she's an environmental philosopher and Buddhist teacher, Joanna Macy, who talks a lot about this and the horror of watching something you love die, but you don't turn away. You stay and you pay attention. Yeah, I think about it all the time.
And that this is also not our planet's first extinction.
I know, where this is a sixth extinction. Yeah, but this is all human.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about it, for thousands and thousands of years, human beings have managed to live in reciprocity with the environment. And it's, been what? I don't know, 300 years, 400 years, we're off the chart.
Yep.
And I think, I mean, it's part of why I pay so much attention to the natural world and try in a way to also accept the pain that is part of being of it. We are of what we're killing. That's what gets me. It's not like we're apart from it. We have risen out of this. We are of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People keep saying that technology is going to save us, but yet we're still physical bodies. And
yeah, I know, right?
And
I don't want to give that up. Actually, it's really nice. I'm really grateful I can digest food and I can walk and breathe oxygen. I mean, it's great living in a body. I love it.
Right.
I don't want to give it up.
But also when we were talking before about, the body contains so much knowledge versus just what's up here. I mean, we get so much information just through our skin, the way we touch things, the way things feel. It's like our fingers know things that sometimes our minds forget.
Absolutely. Get a handle on it. It's because that is how we've come to be who we are, human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree.
You can't just live in this, headspace.
And this is a great example. This is some rabbit entrails that I found. I walk every day in this woods. And for a while I was seeing a lot of thrown entrails. And I learned later that coyotes throw the entrails. They don't eat that part. And I was so astonished by this though, because if you see in the center, that's the stomach, and you can still see the green mash of grass. So here's the sun turned and feeding the grass turning the sun's energy into energy that rabbits eat, that feed the coyote, that continue down this path, this beautiful circular relationship that we are a product of. And so I wanted to make a piece just to honor the sun and the rabbit. And of course I used wire, but I love the whorls in the hair and thinking about our fingerprints or thinking about all these individual lines to sort of build up to create motion within a still object. And so this is just really fine wire. I kind of bend it and then I sit and just play with each line at a time, welding it into place to try to describe the form. And then the foot I set with these green adventuring stones. I mean, in part homage to the lucky rabbit's foot I had when I was a kid, but just thinking how lucky it is to live. There's that wonderful author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer. Mm-hmm. And she talks about having photosynthesis envy. And I can totally relate to that. So the vessel for this rabbit is kind of based on a sedge, the kind of a clumpy grass. And you can see it's sort of coming together, very open, really not like a vessel at all, but always a container. And then here I am setting the foot with the stones.
So how did you originally come to work with metal?
I went to school thinking I would be a Russian studies major at the University Michigan. But part of the reason for that choice was a samovar we had in our house that my great Aunt Margaret got from Russia before it became the Soviet Union. Long story, but objects, right? I loved objects. So I went to study Russian and I was really bad at it. I had never gotten a B in my life. And I'm sitting with a B- in Russian. I'm like, I need a new major. And I took an art class and fell in love and started in the metals department. I wanted to do sculpture, but I found the quality of the relationship was intolerable. It was so misogynist. So I went to small metals and started making spoons. And I was like, this is where I belong.
But
and
you didn't stay small.
No, but the first time I made a rain, it was like the clouds parted. It just made so much sense, you know, that you would work with your hands and tools to make intimate objects that talked about being human and spelled stories. And I was like, of course, this is for me.
Awesome.
That's a good question. So finishing up the rabbit and this little pile of bronze sort of seed forms were for the vessel. And there it is, finished. The seeds, again, in that beautiful golden hue of the bronze, referencing the sun, that energy into the grass through the rabbit.
And this sits on a pedestal, or do you have it sit on the ground when it's displayed? Or
no, it's not super big. It's only 27 inches wide, so it's smaller. You know, it's just about a little over about 2 feet wide. So yeah, it's like a tabletop vessel.
So is the rabbit like a rabbit size?
It is, yeah. Well, more like a hare,
Okay.
really, not a rabbit. More, I love the muscular quality of the hare, so I usually use those as a model. Just from images. Like I started this rabbit and I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever thought to make. And it sat for a while. I just couldn't do it. And then I don't know what was going on. I didn't have anything better to do. So I picked it up again and I kind of fell in love with it.
It's gorgeous.
But the thing is, you know, as a creative person, when you're on the pursuit of something, you don't know if it's the worst idea you ever had or if you just haven't spent enough time on it. Surely.
Yeah. It's like that moment before a roller coaster where you're super excited and terrified at the same time.
Yeah.
But how does the final image live up to the image you kind of had, like the first image you had? Does it morph and change as you keep
changes so much,
working it? And then
yeah, I mean, I have an idea, but I really can't imagine the resolution. And so it's a constant negotiation all the way down the line. And when I was done with this piece, I actually thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever made. I couldn't believe I made it. Couldn't believe it was mine. Usually I finish a piece and I hate it so much I can't look at it for like 3 months. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's not so bad. So it's never what I think it's going to be. But that's the blessing, right? If we already knew, we wouldn't need to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was our last slide.
Yay.
That was amazing. Do we have any other questions that have come in?
I'm not seeing any, but please feel free to ask your questions.
Yeah, and we've got, that was wonderful, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we've got 2 other presentations coming up, one with Bill Burns, who's this amazing Canadian artist that has been working with Indigenous communities and doing these phenomenal performances. And then following that, we have Sandow Burke in December, who will be our guest and talking about the various projects he's working on as well. And he just did a drawing class that I know a few of our BAC students got to attend. So that's what's coming up next. And I encourage you to look up more about Kim's work and sign up so you can find out when she's having exhibitions and everything. So thank you so much, Kim, for being here.
Meg, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and everyone for joining today. I hope you have a great weekend.